Steph Lee, founder of Host Agency Reviews. And I have on with me a familiar face if you are watching on YouTube, or a familiar voice if you are listening to the podcast, April Swales with Uniglobe Travel Center. Welcome again.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it is so great to have you on, and I am excited. Okay, so we've been talking about Host Week during our Friday 15 for quite a while. It is coming up. It is January 29th. If you have not registered already, it is such a blast. There's a ton of information, whether you're new or experienced. There's giveaways, there's specials for host agencies, tech companies. And one of the things that's exciting that's new this year is something called our coffee spots. I think Rita talked about it last week when she took over for me because I had COVID, but feeling better this week. And one of them is these coffee spots where you get to spend about 50 minutes with a company. And one of those companies is Uniglobe Travel Center. So they are doing a coffee spot on Friday, February 2nd at 11 Central, 12 Eastern. Mm-hmm. And you'll have to figure out the rest of the time zones because my brain's a little slow today. I'm proud I remembered that. Yeah. But what's really cool about it is Uniglobe has been generous enough. So part of the coffee spots is for the first 75 registrants. You get a $7 gift card to buy yourself a coffee or a tea or a carbonated beverage. Whatever you want to caffeinate yourself to get the day started. So we'll put the link in to register. So make sure to register and check out that coffee spot. And learn a little bit about Uniglobe. And before we jump into questions, I wanted to say thank you. A couple weeks ago, I put a call out for some reviews, and we got one from one of my favorite things about reviews is when it's not a name like Stephanie, and it's almost like reading a vanity plate when you go by, and you're like, so it's either from Blade Blah, Blah de Blah, Blah Deb Blah. But thank you because they said they had started as an agent two years ago with their old travel agent, and they're learning underneath their wing at their own pace. But one of the challenges with this, is they don't get a lot of training in the industry unless she's booking something. So being able to tune into this has really helped her learn about the industry more. So thank you for writing that. Really appreciate that. And thank you to all of you who sent in questions. So our first one comes in from Lori S. And the question is, can an agency change your commission levels without notifying you or sending you a new contract to sign? Shouldn't there be some kind of agreement or acknowledgement from the agent before it happens? Then what if a host changes to a monthly fee? Again, shouldn't there be a new contract or the option to leave and take your business? My partner and I are experiencing this and could use some advice. So April, I would love to hear, number one, your thoughts on it, and then what Uniglobe, kind of the expectations with the contracts and things like that. So
sure. Well, the first thing I want to say to Lori is that I'm sure it's very frustrating. And, I can certainly relate to having things in the industry in the beginning, like not understand, I found things like that very frustrating too. So especially if you're a black and white analytical thinker like I am.
Yeah.
So, my first thought would be you really should go back and reread your original contract with your host agency. Make sure that you understand all of the ins and outs. I am the type of person that when I read a legal document, and these are legal documents, my eyes cross sometimes. And sometimes I have to read it 3 or 4 times to really grasp what it's saying. So if you feel like you're reading it and it's still not crystal clear to you, either go back to your host for clarity, or I would recommend even having an attorney read it for you. Ideally, an attorney who is familiar with host agency contracts, because not all of them are. So that would be my first thought. I also think it's important to kind of understand that host agencies all essentially serve the same purpose, but we all do it our own way. So just because one host agency does it something one way doesn't mean that they all will. So let me tell you how Uniglobe handles it. Whenever we have any sort of a quote unquote change, we don't really change the contract if there's a change in commissions. But what we do is we have a commission tier. So, if you're coming in with no prior book of business, you would start at 70-30. Once you've reached your first sales threshold of 100,000 in gross sales, we would bump you up to 80-20. In our contract, it states that becomes your new minimum. You don't ever go back below that. But then whenever you get to your second sales threshold of 250,000 in gross annual sales, then we would bump you up to 90/10. But you have to maintain 250,000 year over year in order to stay at 90/10. So if your sales dip and we do that review at the end of the calendar year and you haven't met that 250,000 sales goal, then you would go back down to 80/20. And that's not something we would just email you and let you know, because it's in our contract that way.
Mhm.
Now, so make sure you're understanding how yours is written. When it comes to suppliers changing their commission, that can happen too, because your commission levels with suppliers are based on, not yours, but the host agency's commission levels are based on the total sales volume that the agency is doing with that supplier. And that happens, so when that happens, we typically get an email stating it. We let the network know, but there's no change specifically in our contract.
Mhm.
So just because this is happening to you doesn't mean that something nefarious is afoot. I still think it's important to understand. So have somebody help you read the contract if you need to, but it's not necessarily indicative of them doing something shady or illegal.
Yeah. April, just to clarify for Uniglobe's contract. So when you're talking about if they happen to not meet those sales thresholds and they need to drop down, that's for the following year then that they're going to drop
Correct.
down. It's not that you take the commission retroactively back.
No,
Yeah.
it's going forward. And then once their sales numbers recover, then we'll bump them back up. But no, we don't retroactively recall or do anything like that.
Mhm. And I don't, just for those listening, I don't think most host agencies would do that because that would be a huge hassle and unfair. Like people aren't planning for that monetarily.
Correct.
But I'm going to share my screen. So on the site, we do have April's advice of having an attorney talking to a travel attorney specifically is going to be a great idea. So there's a couple of resources. One is our travel industry attorney or lawyer list. So the link is going to be in the show notes if you want to just click it that way. Otherwise, you can go to the site and in the search box up at the top, if you type in attorney or lawyer, it'll pull up the article on there. The other one I want to show you is our contract one. So this is if you type in contract up in the search bar, this is the travel agent contracts for ICs, 10 things to think about and look for when you sign. This is a great resource as you're going through yours, first of all. And then if you're switching agencies, this is a good thing to know and be aware of. And we also reached out to Mark Pastrant, who is one of those of you might recognize the name from, he's number one contributed to the podcast before, but he has been writing a column for Travel Weekly, the kind of legacy newspaper within the travel industry for 24 years. He's a really sharp guy and is deep in the travel industry. And he wrote back and he just said, he can't really give advice because without seeing the contract, first of all, that's very difficult. And then the other thing is, if they have in there that the contract, that the commission levels might change at will, then there's nothing wrong in that. Let's see, he says, similarly, the contract could provide for no termination rights if such changes occur, which would mean that if the commission levels do change, that doesn't give you the right to leave. But it all depends on what's in the contract. So we'll put those links in about the contract. We'll put a link in to Mark's website if anyone's interested in contacting him. He's incredibly fast at getting back. And we're also going to put a link into Mark's column within Travel Weekly because it is something I read religiously on Travel Weekly because I'm always picking up something new in there.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So question 2 comes in from Jamie W. So this one is, how do I have my agency added to host agency reviews? So they're a host agency wanting to get added. April, I know you don't know how this process works, so I'll just take this really quickly. It's really simple, Jamie. So for those of you listening and we try to be very transparent about the structure of our site. Using the site and all the resources as a general rule is free for everyone. And the way that happens is because of generous sponsors like Uniglobe Travel Center, that helps support us through advertising. So, but having said that, it's also important for us that, people can see all of the host agencies out there. So every profile is free and you can choose to upgrade. And Jamie, if you're interested, you can email hello@hostagencyreviews.com, and we will work with you to get your profile set up. It takes just a few minutes. So, all right, last question is from Anonymous. This is a big one. I currently have a host agency, but I'm looking around. My sales are between 2 and 3 million a year. So this will be the biggest decision I've ever made for my business. I'm starting to look around. What are the average commission splits that are out there, and what is typically included in that?
It is a big question. It's quite a loaded question as well, because there's so many ways that you can answer this. I can only give you what we do, but I can kind of give you some pointers too in figuring out, like, where to look. And obviously, Host Agency Reviews is a fabulous resource. But first of all, kudos on your sales volume. That's incredible, especially if you're a single agent agency. You may have subs, which might make it tricky for the transition just because it's more work involved. But hats off to you. I think that's incredible that you're doing that kind of business. When it comes to commission splits, you might see them anywhere from 50% to 100%, so, obviously you have options, which is a fabulous thing. I think everybody, when they're looking at a transition, should be looking at least 3 to 4 different host agencies, getting those host agencies on the phone, getting their questions answered, because it's not about who's the best. Commission splits are not indicative of who's the best. Okay. It's about who aligns with your business goals. And so you need to be very clear with what your goals are going forward, so that you can ask the right questions to make sure that you're aligning yourself with the right business partner, because a host agency is a business partner. That would be my first thought. My second thought is, the fees involved. So when you're looking at commission splits, make sure you're also looking at the fees, so that there's a give and take, and you're netting what you want in the end. So,
yeah,
and what consortia do they align with? That's important too.
Yeah. And, I actually chatted with this advisor offline, just to get a little bit more information on it. And they are with a virtuoso agency. And so, for those that don't know, Uniglobe is a virtuoso agency as well. And you can always, on our site, I'm just going to go back. So, I know that this advisor while they've been in the industry for 10 years, they haven't like researched a bunch of hosts in the beginning. They just ended up at one. And so, just so everyone knows, in here on the host agency list, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can go into the search filters, type in Virtuoso, and that'll show you all of the host agencies aligned with Virtuoso. Likewise, if there's other parameters that you're looking for, if you need to make sure that they allow sub-agents because you have sub-agents, there's a checkbox in there, and that'll pull up everyone that allows sub-advisors. So lots of things within the search filters. But the other thing I wanted to show is, let me see if this will work.
And when you're done, I want to elaborate a little bit on mine too.
You elaborate, because I'm going to cruise around on the site for a second.
Well, if you'll show the little filters again,
sure.
Might be helpful. That kind of triggered my thought process. So, when I say figure out what's important to you, sub-agents is a huge one, because if you do have subs and they're helping you with that kind of volume, you want to probably bring them with you. But another thing to think about is, is a lead program important to you? Do you need access to the GDS? Well, with us, if you need, insurance, we don't cover you if you have sub-agents. You would have to have your own E&O, but maybe another host agency does, and maybe that's important to you. So when you look at the big picture of what are your operating costs going to be with one host versus another, and then you compare it with the commissions, that's going to be really important. So really decide what you need first, and then start doing your hunt.
Yes, exactly. And that's going to bring me to, let me just do a refresh really quick. We have an article on our site called How to Find the Best Travel Host Agency. And the idea behind it is exactly what you're saying, April, is that there is no one best host agency. It's all about knowing what you need for your business and then finding that fit. So on this one, it's going to be linked to in the show notes, but the tips for finding the best host travel agency, one of the great things in here is the comparison checklist. And I am going to scroll down to it. But here's a little preview of it. And you can see we have all these different questions where you can compare things side by side beyond like the enrollment fees, the pricing model, but like what are the characteristics they're looking for in an advisor? How long have you been hosting independents, and what's the average sales volume per advisor? What's the commission levels for my top suppliers? So it has all these questions, and of course you can enter your own in there, but it gives you a great base to build off of when you're trying to compare host agencies.
It's probably good too to ask what technology they're using. If you're new to the industry, you might not necessarily be familiar with some of the tools, but somebody like this person,
Yep.
who's been in the industry for a while, is going to be familiar with what CRM that they've been, using, and whether or not it meets their needs, or, these are the types of things you really want to dig into.
Yes, and especially like say you're using Travelify for your itinerary builder, you don't likely at 2 to 3 million in sales, you don't want to take the time, if it's working for you, to learn a brand new itinerary builder, or things along, or the CRM. So those are important things to like think about. There's a lot of work to do before you even start reaching out to host agencies. The other thing I want to show you is we have an article, a commission plan calculator. Let me see. So if we type into the commission plan calculator, if I type in commission plan calculator into the search bar up at the top, it pulls up kind of this information. And this is nice because, like April said, it goes beyond just the commission splits. The other thing you're going to want to take a look at is, what are the costs, say again, for the CRM or any of the things you're paying for individually, your website. So we have that in there, and then you can take out the monthly fees, the annual fees, and it can just give you kind of an idea on. The idea here is actually not for switching, but for you're with a host agency. And if you want to see, does it make sense for me to bump up to the next level if it's not automated the way it is with Uniglobe, not missing out on that extra 10% or 5%. So this is a calculator that can help you do that.
Love it. I didn't even know you had that. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Honestly, I forgot we had it too until I ran across it the other day.
I'm always amazed. I tell people all the time, dig into their blog, because you guys really do have such well thought out content. And that's amazing. It really is. It's a smart tool.
April. Yeah, it's funny because it's it's been the site's been around for 12 years, and with 12 years of content, like sometimes I'm like, oh, Mary did such a great job writing that. Great idea. And I'm like, oh, I wrote that. And I'm like, oh, good job, Steph.
It's up to me. I love it.
And then the last thing I want to show is our travel advisor research reports, because on this article here, we do talk a little bit. April mentioned that the commission splits, it's anywhere from 50 to 100%. But here's some information too that we pull from our site. So the most common low commission split is 70%. So if you're getting 50%, usually that comes around if people are offering very hands-on mentoring or you're getting leads from them. So there's usually a reason why it's lower than that. But for the highest commission split on the high end, it's typically the average is about 90. So that should give you an idea of things. But more details on that for host agencies are up on the top on our what's this called? Our menu bar. Under resources, there's a research thing, and our research reports that we put out every year, we'll put the link into this to the comments, but the hosted travel advisor report has more information on commission splits with host agencies and a little bit more information if people are interested there. Let's see. So I'm going to turn this off, and then we are ending our time here, April, which is always sad for me, but I'm going to put a link into Uniglobe's profile on host agency reviews so people can learn more about you, read your reviews, that sort of thing. And I want to give a reminder, we mentioned this earlier, but the coffee spot that's coming up. I will put a link in to register it. We'll put it in the comments if you're watching it live. It is Friday, February 2nd. And again, 11 Central, 12 Eastern. And it'll be April, you're hosting it, right?
I'll be hosting it, yes.
So you get to spend like 50 minutes hanging out with April, chatting away, learning all about
me.
No, not true. You get to learn all about their programs, much more so than we were able to delve in today. And then lastly, if you have questions for an upcoming Friday 15, we would love to hear them. So you can go to hostagencyreviews.com/Friday15 to submit your own. And coming up for our co-hosts are January 26th, we have Christine Hardenberger with Modern Travel Professionals. February 2nd is host week, and we will have a surprise co-host on. We're going to be choosing a travel advisor that has applied to be a co-host. And then February 9th, we have Melissa Foz with At Home Atlas Travel. So things for you to do. 1, sign up for host week. 2, sign up for the coffee spot with Uniglobe Center. And 3, see us next week, 12 p.m. Central Time for the Friday 15. Have a great weekend, everybody.